Hello and welcome to ThePrint SoftCover, where we launch select non-fiction books. Here with us today is Abhishek Borah, Associate Professor of Marketing at INSEAD France. We're here to talk about his new and also first book, Mind Your Language. It's about the way consumers and businesses communicate and how that can make or break a deal. Welcome, Abhishek. Can you tell us a
Thank
little
you
bit
very
about the
much.
book? Can you
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about the book in your own words? What idea did you go in with, and did you discover something new in the process of writing?
yeah. So the book is about, monetizing language and how businesses can utilize languages for, increasing their bottom lines. So the book is about, how consumers speak with one another and how they get influenced by such conversations. It's about how firms write different reports, how they write press reports, how they write their annual reports. How does that affect audiences? And audiences by mean both consumers and investors and other stakeholders. So, if you think about it, we can think of the telescope as something which changed the way we think about astronomy. The microscope was something which kind of changed the way we look at chemistry and biology, for example. And nowadays, with these tools that we have, which are, appropriate for a lot of ways where we can actually decipher what consumers are talking about, there's been a major transformation. And with the advent of large language models, now we can see what languages are being utilized and how the language is affecting influencers and consumers and other stakeholders. So it's about understanding the way we communicate and how that affects others, how firms communicate and how it affects us.
Yeah. So, one thing you speak about is the importance of reviews. And I think reviews are one of those immediate feedback channels that businesses have with consumers. And what I found very interesting was how the use of swear words affects the credibility of a review. Can you explain why that is? And, if that's just an English language phenomenon or whether that would work in more regional languages as well?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, generally, you might think of words like F dash dash K as something which is inappropriate in a business setting, right? And I went with that null hypothesis in a sense, okay, it shouldn't have any effect, right, in a business setting. But, such a word like F dash dash K actually has many purposes. When we are going through something hard in our life, or when we are going through, you're trying to run a marathon or you're trying to climb a mountain. There's so many times you're like, okay, F dash dash K, why am I doing this? Why am I angry? Why am I suffering through all this? And it has a positive purpose. It kind of helps us promote ourselves. It kind of helps us to display our emotions and, take out those emotions or negative emotions that we have in us. When you put your hand in very cold water, for example, if you again say swear words, it kind of reduces the amount of pain or suffering that you're going through. So I was like trying to see if there is another way where these words can actually have a positive effect on business settings, right? In business settings. And the word, if I use the word F dash dash K, it has several meanings. So Bhagwan Rajneesh Osho had, this 4-minute monologue about that particular word, F dash dash K. And basically he's trying to say that this word has many meanings, In the same way, Steven Pinker, who's one of the world's most famous psycholinguists, has this idea that this particular word, F dash dash K, has 5 different meanings, 5 different functions in a sense. So, this word you may think may not actually work in a business setting, but it works. So if you look at an online review and you read a review which is like, okay, I really like this iPhone, versus another review which goes, I effing like this iPhone, or I'm not using that word. But you read that review, you'll actually like that second review more because that person is emoting out and kind of showing his or her or their emotional reaction to that purchase of an iPhone. So if I'm the reader, say in Amazon, and I read a review such as this, I'll find such reviews more helpful. And, Amazon really cares about the helpfulness, ratings that they get from other readers about a review. So this is what basically it is, that swear words can actually have a positive effect, but there are boundary conditions. You can't you can't have many swear words in one review. You can't be in an angry say on a particular day and you come to a website such as Amazon and you start writing reviews with a score of F words there. There are only two, three that you can use, which will influence a reviewer and a reader of the review, and he or she or they might find it helpful. Yeah.
And what about the bit about, is it just an English language phenomenon? Do you think
Yeah.
Indian
Yeah.
languages?
Yeah. I actually think it is pervasive across different cultures, because this is an emotional reaction which is intrinsic to us as human beings. Okay, so
Mhm.
even if we have a certain setting where a swear word is a swear word, and if you even read in Hindi, you'll find that someone writing such a word will have an emotional impact on the reader. Okay, why
Yeah.
is this person using this word? So I haven't tested it, or nor have the researchers tested it, but I think this will have this can be generalized to other cultures too. Perhaps some cultures where swear words are taboo, that there is
Mhm.
a big, in a sense, prohibition of using such words in even in private settings, in public settings. There it may not work, but mostly I think this would work across cultures.
All right. Apart from product reviews, you also talk about movie reviews and
Yeah.
specifically about spoilers. And
Yes.
contrary to popular belief, you talk about how spoilers actually enhance the box office performance of a
Yeah.
film. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate a bit on that? And is that a general rule or is that more of a case by case basis?
No. So this is almost like a general rule because the authors of the study collected thousands and millions of reviews, and they looked at spoilers.
Yeah.
So what they saw was that generally when I remember when I was an undergrad and Sixth Sense, the movie came out, I just didn't want to myself in a corner and lock myself in a room. Um, so you would think that spoilers have negative effects. Of course, on the person who's trying to watch a movie, it has a negative effect. But overall, they actually find that spoilers have a positive effect on movie revenues. And if I'm the producer of the movie or a production house, which cares about the money generated from making a movie, it is actually helpful. So what they argue and they find through the data analysis is that when you're reading a review which has a spoiler, it actually
Mhm.
reduces the uncertainty that you have regarding the movie. Okay, so there
Okay.
might be some uncertainties about how the movie pans out, what's the big unraveling in the movie. So when you read such reviews, you try to get a sense, okay, this is what happens actually. And that kind of
Yeah.
reduces the amount of uncertainty that is there when you're, anticipating watching a movie. And they say that
Mhm.
this happens more in settings where, say, it's an average movie, right? If I know a movie is really bad, my friends tell me, and it has a rating of 1, I'm not going to watch it, though it
Yeah.
may or may not have a spoiler. And if a movie is really good, then again, I would actually say, okay, I'm going to watch the movie and I don't care about whatever's written. The spoilers don't work there so much. But if it's an average movie where I just want some hint of whether the movie is
Mhm.
a good one or a bad one, and there is and there is some uncertain movie that that this movie has a setting where the killer is kind of unraveled. In those settings, I will
Uh-huh.
try to look at a review which has a spoiler, and I will actually appeal reading. Works as in movies for independent houses. So for blockbuster movies, they already are big, but
Mhm.
movies from independent houses, again, I'm kind of uncertain about the movie. Is this movie good enough? So again, if I read a spoiler, even if a review has a spoiler, it will work because it kind of reduces the uncertainty that I have regarding a movie. It works in settings where the movie's just been released, and
Mhm.
again, you're unsure about the movie's, it doesn't have any potential. Again, when you read such reviews, that again has a positive effect. Yeah. So if you think spoilers have a negative effect and they should not work in film settings, right, where it might have a negative effect on the box office, they actually have a positive effect. Spoilers.
Mhm. All right. That's actually it blew my mind a little bit because I always thought people would want to go into a movie fully blind and just experience
Yes.
it. But I guess that we
Yeah.
just don't like uncertainty.
Yes,
We want to know if something's
basically
worth
the
our
idea is
time.
that. Yes, yes, absolutely.
You also look at social media boycotts, but it's again, largely from an American angle. So how
Mhm.
do you think, companies with a global audience, with a large Indian audience, with a large American audience, a European audience, how do you think they can approach their social media in a way to avoid appearing insensitive, when insensitive can mean very different things to their audience?
Yes, absolutely agree. This is a good question. So, I have one study where we're still analyzing data and we have very, very strong results. So we find three main characteristics, which I think are pretty generalizable. Okay. So one is you are just sloppy. Okay. So there is a McDonald's tweet which kind of got famous because someone wrote neat copy and paste. Someone basically
Yeah.
forgot to add the content in that particular social media message. Okay. So if you're sloppy, that wouldn't work in any culture or country. So that's one.
Mhm.
Second is every brand has a positioning. Say Patagonia, if I talk about Patagonia, which is a brand which is known for its sustainability. Now suddenly you
Yeah.
read a review about, you read a press article about Patagonia that it's using kids from say low income countries for making its clothes. That again goes against what the firm is saying it does, its positioning
Mhm.
versus what it
Yeah.
actually is doing. So that's what we call as mismatch. That there's a mismatch between what the firm says and what the firm does. So that would again, I think,
Yeah.
work in many settings and across many cultures. The third point is about norms, and this might be a bit different. Okay, so there are norms that are different in every country, in every culture. So what we say is that right now, diversity, equity, and inclusion are very important aspects that every firm has to care about, especially in Western countries. Okay, and
Mhm.
actually, it's needed much more in countries like India, but we haven't got into that wave as of now, right? But
Yeah.
if you are a brand which is right now a brand which is well known, and you write something or you post something which is going against the norms or going against the current zeitgeist in a sense,
Mhm.
so there is an out of touch kind of an aspect which happens, right?
Yeah.
So you'll see Amul's ads, right? They're always in touch with what's happening, okay, and
Yeah.
they're also not posting anything which is going against most of what Indians want. So you'd have to kind of figure out, if you're an Indian content manager, managing a social media brand in India, you'll have to go with the norms which are there in India, right? Which are specific to
Yeah.
the specific culture. If you are, someone working in Russia, then they have very different cultural tastes. You'll have to be again, the norms will be different for what's happening in Russia versus Western countries, right? So you again have to kind of create your content which is adhering to the taste of that audience. So that's, I think, the ideas are, I think, pervasive across different cultures, but those norms, especially for the norms aspect, that will differ.
And you think that, a challenge for companies with a wide audience base is
Yeah,
it better
yeah.
to remain silent on social media, keep a, just do a traditional, okay, look at my product, or do you think they should, start speaking about values and what their brand means and things like that?
Yeah, I think it emerges out of the brand's overall essence of what it does, its mission statement. Patagonia, I'm using Patagonia again. Patagonia is a brand which cares about the world, all right?
Yeah.
And they are authentic, they are true, they are genuine, and they mean what they say. And that comes out from their philosophy. So if a brand is philosophically attuned to an idea which it really, really stands by, right? It's it's coming out, and they will write posts, they will engage in content in social media or press release which is totally in tune with what their philosophy is, versus a
Yeah.
brand which is into selling products and has created an innovative product but doesn't know where it stands philosophically or in its mission statement. Then it will appear, and audiences can figure out, okay, this brand is doing something which doesn't connect with what it actually is about. So you have to, in a sense, adhere to the mission statement that the brand has. If a brand wants to position itself differently and it wants to become a brand which cares about the world, yes, you can do it, but you also have make changes in the internal organization, right, which will make it
Yeah.
sound more true. Yeah, so if you want to be silent and if you want to be a brand which just cares about its product and makes customers happy, great. Then I wouldn't uh, advise such firms to get into such engagement, versus a firm
Mhm.
which is totally cares about the world. And I'm using the idea of sustainability or environmental development in the world. if you care about it, then it is actually almost in a sense very important that you get there in social media and make your voice heard.
Yeah. Speaking about, authenticity and honesty as opposed to just following a particular trend that's happening, are
Mhm.
you seeing brand communication sort of pivot to authenticity or following a trend cycle of, what's happening on social media chatter?
Yeah, yeah. So in the past, I think it was more, say, about 5 years ago, it was more with just the following the trends. But I think
Hmm.
the world, and especially younger listeners, they're curious about the world, and they have their, you know, um, they have their own thinking about how should the world work. So nowadays, I think firms in general, they cannot just, dive into a zeitgeist and kind of write content which is inauthentic. Okay.
Hmm.
You have to be true to what you are as a brand. And because the Gen Z, for example, will just catch it. Okay. So
Yeah.
I think nowadays, riding the wave, I think there are brands who are riding the wave of authenticity because, we care about
Mhm.
authentic brands. But again, in the long term, if these brands cannot persist in, maintaining their authenticity, they will be basically told to be, okay, get out of here. You know, you does as a brand, if you want to be authentic, you have to be true to your mission statement and basically involve the whole organization in
Yeah.
that philosophy. Because many brands are nowadays becoming authentic, and there are, because there's this wave in a sense. Okay, you have to be
Yeah.
honest, you have to be sustainable, you have to be all this and that. But again, this is a wave. But brands who have always been true, Patagonia has been there for a long time, right? It's always been true. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to into authenticity and the wave of all these things which are happening. So that's what I think. That's what I surmise. Yeah.
Uh, Being honest and true is one thing, but also the complexity level of the message that you're putting out is another thing that you talk about. You
Yeah.
speak about the gunning fog index and
Yeah.
how a lower number on the index is basically how less complex a sentence is.
Yeah.
And when it's less complex, it appeals to a wider audience. Am I
Yes.
getting that right? Okay.
Yes.
So, how low can you go before it gets too low?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends again on the audience. So I'm in marketing and I teach, segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And targeting is a very important aspect here. So it depends upon your reader. If you're writing a book like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, or if Salman Rushdie is writing Midnight's Children, it's almost hard for even a college graduate to read those books because it's so complex and so,
Mhm.
convoluted. So if you're writing to that audience and who need some stories or some narratives which are complex, then great, go ahead with writing complex sentences. But for someone who wants to read something which is easy, which is simple, which is active in a sense, then you have to kind of tone down the way you write and use simple words, use simple language. Don't use complex structures when you're writing something. So for my book, I've used it. I don't know what my gunning fox index is, and lower the number means it is even someone at class 7 or someone who's a 14-year-old can read it. I think even a 12-year-old can read my book. So I wrote it in a manner which it appeals to a bigger audience. But if I make it too low, if I make everything sound so simple, then it becomes too simple. And again, there is this threshold here, right? And I hopefully could arrive at that threshold, more than that threshold, and I know that I did. But again, it's the writer knowing, okay, this is my audience, and this is what I want to reveal. This is what I want to give to my audience, and I wrote it for the common man, in a sense, the common woman, the common person.
Yeah.
And I assumed an average level, where it's not too simple, but it's simple enough for anyone to digest something. So again, it depends upon the target audience and what the writer does, thinking about that audience.
All right. Another topic you touch upon in the book is the creation of a community around a product or a brand, and
Yeah,
how how a customer speaks about the brand, perhaps
yeah,
online in their social group, how that affects the brand. Can you
yeah.
explain this with an example? And how does this sort of customer communication play a role in a multilingual country like India?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, I talk about similarity in language. Again, if I use the brand by boycott, for example, I talked about the firm's aspects such as the sloppiness, the out of message, out of touch, and these aspects. Now, someone who is from a community, say a Facebook community, gets angry with, say, a pizza company, okay, pizza brand, and posts something. So that person who has a writing type which is similar to the other community members, that person will have more of an effect than someone who writes in a manner which is different than what the community seeks. Okay. So the whole idea here is of linguistic similarity, of how I'm communicating with my audience, with my community. And people generally find, I mean, researchers have found that if you write in a language which is similar to the community, that will drive more engagement, or people will believe that person more, or people will read that review more, trust in it more. So if I think about a multilingual country like India, say I'm Assamese, right? And I'm in an Assamese community forum, and I'm wanting to participate in that forum and become someone, who is kind of, friendly with all the community members. For me, it's very important that I write in my Assamese in a manner which is similar to what the community members write. Okay, so that's an important aspect. So it's about, thinking about, okay, this chapter where I call it How to Talk to Your Date. Basically, it's all about the idea of linguistic similarity, which really matters. And across different disciplines in strategy, in marketing, how do you become, if you join a new company and there are different groups in a company, right? There can be different thinking patterns. And I want to it's very important that I use the same kind of language in my email communication with other members. So say I'm writing to and fro to a group, which is say the R&D division, and I've just joined the R&D team. It's important that I kind of adhere to the language of that community. Because if I start writing differently, or my manner of writing is in a pattern which is not similar to what the community generally does, then that can become very difficult for me, because I wouldn't be accepted in that community because my language is different, because the way I express is different, the way I interact is different. So I think in India it's even more important, because we all have different languages in different states. When I talk Nagamese with my Naga friends, I basically talk in a language. It's amazing. My friends tell me that I adapt to the way I speak. When I'm talking in Delhi and amongst my friends in Delhi, I speak very differently. My Hindi is very differently versus say I'm speaking Hindi with someone who's Assamese. They'll be very different. So I, in a sense, almost always knew that intrinsically, that I kind of adapt or adjust to the language pattern or the linguistic pattern that I'm to the person that I'm speaking to, and I get into that same kind of wavelength. So that's what the whole idea is about. Trying to be as similar, because if you're not trying to be similar, or if you're not similar, I mean, you shouldn't be someone who's trying to adjust yourself too much, right? But if you're a person who likes to be in that community, and you know that you can do it, and you have a language which kind of is relevant and is similar to that community, of course, go for it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And that's like my last question is, there's a bit on the blurb of how to spot a fake review. So can you
Yes.
give a few tips on how to spot a fake review?
Yeah. So, it's very difficult actually to spot a fake review, because we don't actually know if the review is fake or not, right? We don't know. Someone's written it on the internet. And unless we meet that person, or, ask that person, okay, is that review that you wrote fake? And we will never know that, right? It's very difficult. So researchers have done, computer scientists have, kind of figured out certain characteristics of fake reviews, okay? And researchers also have kind of tested these experiments where they tell one group of people who have actually gone to a restaurant to write a review, a true review, versus the same set of respondents to write a fake review where they didn't actually go to that restaurant. And then they have compared the way the language has been used. So it's in a sense, trying to figure out deception and trying to figure out lies, in a sense, which has been a field that people have been studying over the years. So there are many markers of such language. First is fake reviews generally try to use words which have a lot of exaggeration, a lot of emotional intensity, and it's almost like extrovert language where they're writing emotional words. So it's too much of it, so you'll understand that this review seems fake. They use a lot of quotation marks. Okay, why would I use a quotation mark? Say I stayed in a restaurant, in a hotel in Vienna, say last week, and I came back and I want to write a review. Why would I use quotation marks of someone when I experienced that thing? I actually went through that whole event, going to that hotel, staying in a restaurant, staying in the hotel, lodging in that place. They also tend to contain a lot of exclamation marks, fake reviews. Why would I use too many exclamation marks? I might use one or two, but if there are too many, that seems kind of doubtful that this is like a true review. Fake reviews, there's been research which has shown that if you're asking for a loan, right, actually apply for a loan in this website prosper.com, and someone would lend you, it's like to be a lender. A lot of people who ask for fake reviews, who ask for money, borrow money, and who don't pay back, basically they default, tend to use words which have words like we. A lot of we being used, like plurals. Why would I write something plural when I want to actually borrow money, right? So you're trying to distance yourself from the kind of manipulation or the activity that you're doing, and you're trying to get yourself out of that, right? So you use we words, distancing yourself. These loans also have a lot of words like God and family. Why would I use words like that? And basically, it might mean that this person is going through something hard and at this point in time, and it may continue in the future. And that's why this person is writing words like God, family, please. Again, there are many markers, many markers which can help. And researchers have documented that, and I also document them in the book, where I give readers many examples of what fake reviews contain. Yeah, but it's fascinating. It's still very difficult to find out fake reviews. Computer scientists are still working on it, but there have been a lot of work which has led to some overall, patterns, and some of the patterns I discuss in the book, and I just, related them to you right now.
Do you think ChatGPT is throwing a wrench a little bit into the research? If ChatGPT can write more convincing fake reviews, or even like ChatGPT written press releases and things like that.
Yeah,
does that?
Yeah, it's becoming difficult. Yeah, it's becoming difficult because a lot of the language which ChatGPT uses is based on, it's basically a database that it utilized, right, to create the patterns of language. And depending upon the database use, so say, for example, I want to write a paper on my field, right? So I'm a marketing professor, I write research articles. What I could do is I could put in all my papers to a database, right? And other authors that write similar to, or the kind of research that they do. And I can create a large language model which will look at all these, articles and generate an article for me, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm feeding in the right data, in the right kind of papers, and say all the documents that I've ever written in my life, and I create a large language model out of it, I can basically write any paper. I can write any article, I can write any paragraph, I can write any story, I can write any letter. So it will become difficult if people actually kind of personalize all of this, right? Where I can generate content based on my head, right? What I have experienced, what I have actually done in the past. So it's getting difficult, but still there are some markers. As of now, using the ChatGPT, at least you know that, okay, this person has used ChatGPT, because there's some markers which are, we all have started using ChatGPT, so we know, okay, this seems like a ChatGPT driven content, right? Because it's our we've formed some heuristics in our mind to organize our head around these kind of language patterns, and we understand, okay, this seems like something which is from a large language model. But it will become more difficult over time, because these large language models will get more data. If it's a domain-specific large language model, it might become even more difficult because the data at the back end will be better. If these large language models learn from the way we communicate and give content, they will become smarter. They will also adjust to the way that we want it to. So it will become more and more difficult. Yeah.
Not a very optimistic note to end on, but it is reality of where we are right now. Well, thank you so much for speaking to the Print Professor. This is Theres from Delhi signing off. For more such videos, subscribe to the Print YouTube channel.